Rick and Bubba show. Still to come, the second gift of Rick and Bubba Christmas could happen at any time on the program. Mike Lutzenkirchen is with us. Mike, you may have seen the special that was done on him on ESPN just a few weeks ago. His son Philip was a standout in college football. He played for Auburn University. My oldest son was fortunate enough to be one of his teammates, and I always thought a lot of Philip, and still does. And Mike is here today. It's interesting, Mike, because I've got an event I'm doing tomorrow with a family whose son passed away in a car accident, and I remember contacting them this week about the event, and I said, I know this is an event you wish you weren't having, but you are. So we'll work through it. I know that when I get to go out and tell our family story, it's a story I wish I wasn't telling, and I know that you wish that this was somebody else's platform, not yours.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case for me also.
Yeah.
I tell a lot of people in the last 21 weeks, you don't plan for anything like this. But, when you got a deep faith and you knew your son had a deep faith and you know where your son's at today, God's thrown a plan at me, and I'm trying to fulfill that plan. Even if I just told Bubba, I don't know what that plan is,
right?
The end of it, but I know there's a series of steps that I'm being watched on.
When I heard they were going to do the special, and I knew that you were speaking to teams, and I know the character of your family just from the little bit of exposure I had to it during the times that we were there at Auburn at the same time. But I'll have to admit, there was a side of me going, what's Mike going to do? What is he going to say? And when I heard you not skirt the issue of the final few hours of Philip's life, as difficult as that is, I commend you for that.
Absolutely. I same way, feel the same way. We were worried that, and I felt this way, that Philip was so well liked and so well respected that might become the story, and we missed the part that needed to be told that will save lives in the future. And you did a great job with that, and I know that had to be very, very tough.
Yeah, I probably overstate it, and I've told people have told me I need to stop. I'm a pretty simple guy. And I've got a great family. My wife, Mary, I've known since second grade. Started going to school together in high school. I've really never been on another date. So
back to our last topic.
We've been married 29 years legally, and I joke I've been kind of yanked around by the collar for about 35 or 36 years.
Right, yeah.
I'm blessed to have a great wife and 3 beautiful daughters, and we have a very open and candid family.
Right.
And Philip, I can honestly say, was my best friend. And he was mature beyond his years. I'd be doing a disjustice to this situation if I wasn't frank and telling the facts behind the story. And I wasn't there that last day, but I've been told what happened that day, and I spoke to about 1,000 kids over the last 2 days up in the Memphis area at 3 different high schools, and you got to be frank with them because Philip did wonderful things for 23 years and 28 days, and it was that last day that got him.
Well, and I think when you look at your story, as much as you wish you weren't telling it, the thing I thought about when I saw the special was Philip, where he is now, and our loved ones. If he could come back and say, "I'd like to tell everybody what to do, do parts of my life, but let me tell you what not to do," but he can't. You're his voice, and you're doing what I think you feel like Philip would absolutely do if God gave him the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, it's funny. Neither Philip nor I are big golfers. Enjoy the game of golf, but I've been using an analogy that everybody's pretty familiar with, a mulligan. And I'm confident that God gave Philip a mulligan, something very quickly after this accident occurred, and he turned it down. For 23 years old, his faith was very mature beyond a typical 23-year-old. I know he's comfortable where he's at. I've got work to do to be able to get to where Philip's at, and there'll be a day I'm going to learn everything of why it happened at age 23. But somebody asked me after I spoke to Georgia, Mr. Lutz, what do you hope happens to all these speeches? And I kind of said something a little corny, I guess. I said, I'm going to be sitting next to my son someday, and he's going to say, remember September 24th, 2014, Dad, 13 kids on that UGA football team got your message.
Right.
So that I'm Philip's happy. Philip's happy with that.
I remember I had an opportunity to be there in 2010 to come speak to the team on a Friday night, and because I know that sometimes people are out there going, oh well, now we're gonna make Philip out to be this great man of faith because we want him to. But I can tell you firsthand, he was one of the guys that was there with us after the message was delivered, and a lot of players on his team gave their life to Christ that night, and he was there with us and talking through it and counseling people. So I saw that firsthand. But decisions at 23, even though he was mature beyond his age, many people of all ages, when you make decisions, they do have consequences. And I know, especially having one who's the same age of Philip when he went into eternity, there is a certain bulletproof sense that they have that even if today kind of got away from me, I'll have it corrected tomorrow, and I'll learn, and so kind of take us through. Some people may not know what happened the day that Philip went into eternity.
The details I've got on it, Rick, Philip went with some kids. It was amazing how wide Philip's popularity was, and there were kids from UGA and in Alabama and in Auburn, and a bunch of kids that, quite frankly, my wife and I had never met. And I've had a lot of people ask me, is that a concern to me? And it's really not, because I think Philip had such high character. He surrounded himself with kids with high character. And, they went to a farm outside rural Georgia, or rural LaGrange, Georgia, which I haven't had the courage to go to the site or don't care to go do that right now. And, I'm a Chicagoan, and I kind of joke with these kids to try to lighten up a little bit the message when I go talk to them, and they were mudding. I don't understand why people mud, quite frankly.
Well, you're from Chicago. You wouldn't get
that.
We grew up muddy.
Yeah, we're skitching up there, which is sliding behind cars on a bumper, right?
Yeah, same thing. Just
it's our version of it without ice.
Yeah, probably not very smart. But and they went out having fun like kids do, and started drinking that day, hot day. Went in and did some grilling out for dinner, drank some more. My guess is they went from beer to something a little more strict. And then they decided to go out about 2 in the morning, a couple of them. Of all things, to get a can of dip. So very late early in the morning after drinking. And, then they came back, and we're driving 20 miles over the speed limit. Miscalculated, never came to a stop, went through a T intersection, and 3 of the 4 weren't wearing seatbelts. And when I talk to these kids, I give them statistics at the end, the number 1, 25, and 100, and just walk them through the scenario. But what I've been told most likely happened in that vehicle, and then the ultimate ending spot. And the one child that wore a seatbelt walked away with a concussion. 25% of the kids in that car that wore a seatbelt walked away with a concussion. 100% of the seatbelt wearers walked away with a concussion. The other 3 didn't. And 2 of them were fully ejected from the vehicle, including Philip, and the driver was partially ejected. So I kind of close with these kids when I go talk, very candid about those 3 points, and say, I've been to Vegas a lot in my life because of business, and I'm not a gambler, and it's a great place to watch people. But if I had a chance to gamble on this, I'd take a bet that if Philip had worn a seatbelt, he'd be with us today. I don't know what shape or condition,
right?
But no doubt he'd be with us.
We'll come back. We'll talk more with Mike and what he's doing and going around and talking to athletes and students all over the country. As you've already heard, you can follow them on Twitter at Lutzy43. The website is Lutzy43.org for the Lutzy 43 Foundation, trying to work on developing the character of young athletes, their coaches, and you'll find that information there as well. More with Mike right after this.
Rick and Bubba.
The Rick and Bubba Show. Mike Lutzenkirchen is with us today. His son Philip Lutzy, big college football star, and even had an opportunity in the NFL. Obviously had a nagging injury there his senior year, but very well known, and lost his life in a car accident. And his dad has felt the call to go out and to not only tell his son's story, but to go out and warn others about some decisions that were made on that day that ultimately, as we were just talking about in the break, led to his his earthly death. And I know it's difficult, Mike, but I mean, you're talking. I've seen clips of you speaking to some of these athletes and these students, and if anything good can come from this, I mean, to me that brings healing. I know that's the case with my family, and I'm sure it's the case with yours. I hope that some of the pain is there's a little bit of salve that goes on that hurt when maybe, like you were talking about in the first segment, somebody says, "Hey, that got to me today. I'm gonna change some decisions that I'm making. I'm gonna go in a different way." And what is that? If we already kind of hit kind of the meat of the message you try to share with these kids?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the elements of I think are critical, or what I call temptations when I talk to the kids. You know, I've kind of titled the talk Philip's Legacy. What legacy are you leaving? And throughout about the 30 to 45-minute talk, I ask the kids to think about what's their brand right now. Where do they want to take their brand? And then when I get to temptations, whether it's inappropriate social media use or drinking underage, not treating others with love, that knocks your brand backwards. So I spend as much time talking about Philip's first 23 years and what he did in life and under the categories of character development and faith development and local community service, because Philip was phenomenal at that. I'd like to say I taught him to do that. He just picked it up, had it in his heart to give to others. I got a lot of credit to Chet Williams and the FCA program at Auburn that did a wonderful job. You referenced talking to the team. You know, Chet will tell you Philip came in, your typical freshman, had a foundation, sat in the back of the room. By the time they won the national championship his sophomore year, Philip was in the front row and became one of the vocal ones because
Which is when I came in. That's what I saw.
He learned it's okay to talk about your relationship with God, and especially in that environment where they encourage it. And so, you know, the foundation is the idea of my wife and daughters. Quite frankly, I just happen to be the voice. I happen to have a relationship with coaches from some of my professional life and for-profit life. So it's not too difficult when they see the unique last name and they pick up the story, and then ESPN did that wonderful piece to get in front of these kids and deliver the message that if you can act like Philip for the first 23 years and 28 days of his life, you're going to be, in my opinion, if not as good, a better person to where maybe you are today. And I know that's arrogant, but that's just what Philip was. And it wasn't about on the field, it was off the field. And if you can learn what he did that last day, whatever is meant to be in your heart and where you're supposed to take yourself, you got a good chance to go that way.
So what I'm hearing from you, that last day was not a typical day for Phil. That he was not really known to be what we would call careless with the alcohol consumption. And of course, I think that led to the no seatbelt. I believe classification point A is drinking to the point of drunkenness. And was that something he'd ever dealt with before? Had you ever seen any issues with that before?
No, not. First of all, as a parent, I don't think your kids do that around you.
Right.
I'm not foolish enough to think. First of all, I tell kids all the time, Philip wasn't perfect. None of us are perfect.
Well, yeah.
Right. So he made his mistakes, but I certainly didn't have a basis to think Philip did that on a regular basis. I mean, I've had the closest friends of mine, closest coworkers from my years at IBM tell me Mikey was just being a kid. Mikey didn't have a normal college life because Fridays in the fall, Saturdays in the fall, he was playing football. He was just making up for lost time, and I don't really like that conversation because he was too smart to be making up for time that he lost. I just think the combination of events that day, and I think what precipitated the poor decision making was the alcohol use. I've had people say to me, Mike, why was the BAC released? Philip did nothing as a criminal offense. And, an attorney told me that called us trying to represent us that I said, I don't have any interest in that. Said, Mike, I asked him why was it released?
Now, what was that you said was released?
His BAC, his blood alcohol content.
Yeah, right. Because he was not the driver.
Wasn't the driver,
Right.
Committed no crime. In the state of Georgia, not wearing a seatbelt in the back seat is not illegal. And the simple word they said is, Mike, he was a celebrity.
Right.
He had made a name for himself in the Southeast, close enough to Auburn, to the big city of Atlanta. To me, a simple guy, that's like a HIPAA violation, but it's not a HIPAA violation. So, I think there's a fallacy in the process that his information was released. But I'm going to be honest, when it came out about 6 weeks after it was released, it paralyzed our family to the point where for about 48 hours, we went through a lot of questions. Why are we doing this foundation?
Right.
Are we wrong for doing the foundation?
Right.
Who am I to get in front of people to talk? But I'll tell you what, God works in a mysterious way. I think it was God finally said to me, he said, Mike, you've built this foundation, you've built your speaking points, and quite frankly, you weren't putting enough emphasis on that last day. And so, Mike, I put it out there publicly. So now what are you going to do with that?
Well, and I think that changed everything.
Yeah, I did too. I did.
It did.
As difficult as it is, we've learned doing this for a living. Whatever somebody's thinking in their mind, go ahead and go to that and take that on. And so I'm not hiding from that. I mean, we acknowledge that. Now let me tell you what we need to learn from that. And I know that's difficult, especially during the process of grieving, which I would tell you, don't miss the grieving process. Sometimes you get caught up in all the speaking and all the stuff, and there, you got to have some time you just grieve. And I know you want to be a man of action, and it's working, and it's a story, so you got to get out there while it's at its height. But we'll pray for you as a family too, because the family's got to grieve.
Yeah, I've learned a lot through this. Right, Mary was asking a lot of questions. Why? And after about a month, I finally said, Mary, you got to stop asking why, because we can't answer the question. And of course, I got enough friends that said to me and heard that, said, Mike, that was wrong of you to do. That's Mary's way of grieving. And I'm very proud of my wife, because she's gone from a very deep month of whys to a real strong purpose now.
Yeah.
And she'd be out speaking versus me if she could. She's an RN. She's got a commitment back in Atlanta. I've always been a sales peddler, quite honestly, sales management. I'm out on the road. I'm comfortable calling a coach and saying, I got a great message. I need to come talk to your kids. But you're like that grieving part. I drove last night from Memphis to Birmingham, and finally figured out in the rental van I had how to get a CD in there.
Right.
And put the CD in, and it's a Need to Breathe, a band called Need to Breathe.
Yeah,
They're
they're
phenomenal.
great. Yeah, they're great.
It's two brothers, Bo and Bear Reinhardt, out of Seneca, South Carolina. I tell these kids, you got to go listen to this, because it's clean, easy rock with a Christian bent to it. There's no FUs and GDs. It's just phenomenal. One song came on, and I probably cried for 10 miles.
Yeah.
51 years old, and I bawled. I mean, to the point I looked in the mirror and said, man, you must look like a wreck. And but it was my time alone, and it was my time spent being with Philip, and it was that real feel of, I can't hug you, I can't kiss you, I can't smell your hair, I can't wrestle with you.
Right.
So I still grieve.
Yeah, and that'll be the rest of your life. It'll just be to different degrees.
Yep.
Well, I thank you for what you're doing, and I pray that those of you that are listening today, that you will somehow be impacted by what this family is going through. They wish they had a different story, but it is their story, and it's impacting many. We'll put the information in show notes today. They're at rickandbubba.com. We'll be right back.
Rick and Bubba, Rick and Bubba.